Good morning, dear students. Today we will start a new chapter. That is chapter 4, the revolt of 1857 to 58. So in this chapter, we will talk about causes of the revolt, main events of the revolt, causes of the failure of the revolt, and the result of the revolt. Okay, the revolt of 1857 to 58. Revolt means to rebel or go against authority. So this chapter is all about what happened during 1857 to 58. So during 1857 to 58, revolt took place. So who against whom? Indian against the British. So in this chapter, we will come to know how Indians revolted against the British during the year 1857 to 58. This revolt of 1857 is the most important chapter in the history of the Indian people, where Indians struggle for their freedom. The British historians called the revolt of 1857 to 58 as Sepoy Mutiny, and Indian historians called it a first war of independence. And the revolt of 1857 was started by the Indian soldiers who worked for the East India Company, and it soon spread all over the world. Millions of farmers, artisans, and soldiers fought historically for over a year and sacrificed their life. In this revolt, Hindu and Muslims fought together so that they will be free from foreign rule. Now let us look at the causes of the revolt. How did this revolt started? The first causes is the political causes. Under political causes, Lord Dalhousie policy of annexation. Policy of annexation means policy of adding more Indian territories under British. This policy caused anger among the people of India. Nana Sahib, adopted son of Bajrao, was denied of the pension his father was receiving. Rani Lakshmi Bai's adopted son was not given the throne after the death of his father. And also, to make matter worse, Lord Dalhousie announced in 1849 that Bahadur Shah II will not be allowed to stay in the Red Fort anymore, and he was compelled to move to a place near Qutb Minar. And also in 1856, when Bahadur Shah II died, Lord Canning announced that his successor will not be allowed to use the title king. The annexation of Oudh without a reason led to a huge uprising. The proposal of taking away the title from the Mughal emperor shocked the Muslim. The annexation of Jhansi, Satara, and Nagpur shocked the Hindus, as they were predominantly Hindu states. So all these matters, all these political causes led to the revolt of 1857. And also the next one, military causes. Under military causes, the East India Company was formed with the help of the Indian soldiers. Though Indian soldiers was working for the East India Company, these soldiers were paid poorly. All the higher ranks were reserved for the British men. That is the reason Indian soldiers were not happy. On top of that, the Enfield rifles, which was used by Indian soldiers, were greased with cows and pig fats. The sepoys had to remove the cartridge with their mouth before loading them into the rifles. They were against this because the Hindus considered cow as sacred and Muslims considered pigs undesirable. Thus, both refused to use these cartridges. So this is another causes of the revolt. The next is social and religious causes. India had a suspicion that they would be converted to Christianity due to the activities of some of the Christian missionaries. The religious sentiment of the peoples were further hurt when a tax was imposed on properties held by temples and mosques. So the people were hurt when the British started collecting tax on properties which was held by temples and mosques. Another reason is the spread of education, English education, the construction of railways and telegraph lines, legislation for the suppression of sati and the remarriage of the widows. So because of all this, the Indian people started to believe that the British were determined to convert the people to Christianity, and the common people did not appreciate these changes. They did not like these changes. The educated Indians were also denied high posts. The Indian people were also humiliated and tortured, and so this was the reason that hurted the sentiments of the Indian people, and this is the another causes of the revolt. The next is economic causes. Under economic causes, there was a time when East India Company used to buy textiles, indigo, spices and food grains from the Indian market in exchange for gold and other precious metal. This played a useful role by exporting Indian goods and by increasing the production of the Indian goods. However, during the 18th century, the pattern of trade went through a drastic changes. There was a change in the pattern of trade during the 18th century. So, with the coming of the Industrial Revolution, England started its own textile industries, and with that, the dependence on Indian textiles came to an end. India soon became a raw material producing country, supplying cotton and jute to the factories in Britain. Cotton was processed into finished clothes and exported back to India. British merchants, they made huge profits through this two-way trade. Another reason is the British claimed the lands and properties of many landlords and talukdars, especially those of Oudh. This made the landlords unhappy. These unhappy landlords became leaders of the revolt of 1857. Another reason is thousands of soldiers under the employment of the native states became jobless when the states were annexed. To the British Dominion. Even religious preachers were forced out of their livelihood with the extinction of native kingdoms. Thus, the people who were affected rose against the British. This was the another cause of the revolt of 1857. Now the last point, immediate cause. The greased cartridges supplied for the new Enfield rifles was the immediate cause for the mutiny. Mutiny means rebellion by the soldiers. The Indian soldier rebelled against the British because of the supply of grease cartridges for the new Enfield rifles, because the cartridges had to be beaten off before insertion. The cartridges were greased with the fat of cows and pigs. Both the Hindus and the Muslims refused to use them, as the cow is sacred to the Hindus and the pig is undesirable to the Muslims. Because of this reason, at Barakpur near Calcutta, Mangal Pandey, an Indian soldier, shot his officer dead, and because of this reason he was hanged to death, and the troops at Barakpur were court-martialed and sentenced to imprisonment. This is the another causes of the revolt of 1857, that is immediate cause. So all these above causes led to the revolt of 1857. In the main events of the revolt. In this revolt, there were important leaders, and they were Rani Lakshmi Bai of Jhansi, Tantia Top, Nana Saheb, and Kunwar Singh. They were the leaders of the mutiny. Mutiny means revolt. They were the leaders of this revolt, and this mutiny centered chiefly among three cities, that is Cawnpore, Delhi and Lucknow. When the revolt broke out at Cawnpore, Nana Sahib, who was living there in comfort, joined the rebels and declared himself to be the Peshwa. The English there surrendered to the rebel forces, but Nana Sahib was finally defeated by General Havelock and he fled to Nepal, where he died after a few years. And by the middle of November 1857, Cawnpore was brought under control by the British. And also Bahadur Shah II, the powerless Mughal emperor in Delhi, was given life imprisonment. He was sent to Rangoon when he died at the age of 87. So he died at Rangoon at the age of 87. And when with his death, it ended the Mughal dynasty. Another center of rebellion was Lucknow, but it was finally recaptured by Sir Colin Campbell in March 1858 with the help of a powerful Gurkha contingent under Jang Bahadur. In central India, the Great Rising was led by Rani Lakshmi Bai of Jhansi and Tantia Top, who came from Cawnpore. The Rani fought very bravely till she was killed in the battle in June 1858. Tantia Top escaped but was captured and put to death. Thus, it ended the episode of the Great Revolt. So, the revolt of 1857 ended. The battle ended in June 1858 with the death of Rani Lakshmi Bai and also Tantia Top escaping. And finally, he was captured and put to death by the British. Now let us look at the causes of the failure of the revolt. This revolt of 1857 failed because the first reason is due to lack of planning, organization and leadership. It failed because they had no leader on top to guide people and command obedience. Since the revolt unexpectedly broke out on May 10, 1857, leaders could do nothing much to make it successful. And also everyone was fighting for their own purpose. There was lack of resources both in men and money, which made the rebels give up the struggle on many occasions. Another reason is the rebel leaders were no match to the British generals. Rani Lakshmi Bai, Tantia Top and Nana Sahib were courageous but were not good generals. Finally, the English mastery of the sea enabled them to get timely help from England. Another reason for the failure of revolt of 1857 is because the emerging middle class did not support the rebels. Why they did not support the rebels is because of the following reason. The middle class in India emerged as a result of the administrative policy of the English rulers. The members of the middle class were captivated by the Western ideas. They thought that only the English could take India into the modern age. So these are some of the points that caused the failure of the revolt of 1857. Now let us look at the result of the revolt of 1857. Even though the revolt was a failure, the consequences of the revolt were very important in Indian history. The result of the revolt was that it ended the company's rule. It also changed the British policy towards Indian states, such as doctrines of lapse was abandoned and the right to adoption was recognized. The policy of doctrine of lapse was that if a king or ruler died without a direct heir, his state would come under direct influence of the British East India Company. So this policy doctrine of lapse was abandoned and the right to adoption was recognized. So we see there is a change in the British policy towards Indian states. Another point is end of Peshwaship and the Mughal rule. Nana Sahib escaped after the revolt as he had actively taken part in it. So with his escape, the Peshwaship came to an end, and also the title of Mughal emperor was abolished when Bahadur Shah II died in 1862, as he also took part in the revolt. And with his death, it ended the Mughal rule. The next is reorganization of the army. The British soldiers realized that the numerical inferiority of the British Indian Army was one of the causes of the revolt. So the number of British soldiers in the army was increased, which meant the expenditure also increased. Artillery and other advanced means of warfare were in the care of the British hands. In order to break down the unity of the Indian soldiers, they were divided and separated. So we can see that there was reorganization of the army. Another result of the revolt was that there was economic exploitation of India. And the next is rise of nationalism. The sacrifice of some great Indian rulers during the revolt of 1857 arose feelings of nationalism among men. Nana Sahib, Rani of Jhansi, and Bahadur Shah became national heroes. People celebrated their heroism and their attempts to fight for freedom. Thus, the end of the result of the revolt of 1857 is that there was rise of nationalism. The next is policy of divide and rule. During the revolt of 1857, the Hindus and the Muslims had unity, and together they fought for the welfare of the country. The British government, they realized that the unity of the Hindus and Muslims was causing a serious threat, and therefore they thought that it would be best if they create a wall between the two communities. Thus they adopt the divide and rule policy that completely destroyed the relationship between the Hindus and the Muslims. And because of this divide and rule policy, the two communities no longer had unity among them. Since the Muslims had taken an important role in the event, they were deprived of patronage in education, business, and services, and Hindus were given preferential treatment. At a later stage, the policy was reversed. The British used this disharmony to their advantage. It was on this ground that India had to be partitioned on the event of her independence in 1947. So these are some of the above points on the result of the revolt.